We have a number of concepts and titles and phrases floating around that all overlap and they're interrelated. One of them is secondary post-traumatic stress, secondary PTSD. Another is vicarious traumatization or vicarious PTSD. Another is compassion fatigue. Another is caregiver burden. One that I think by now we all recognize is different from these is burnout. But let me take a little bit of time and just clarify them. Secondary traumatic stress means it didn't happen to you. You weren't there, but you learned about it, or your friend had it, or your relative had it, or you're a therapist and you heard so much from your patients that now you have some of these symptoms. And that's pretty much the same as vicarious traumatization. My friend Laurie Perlman wrote the book on vicarious traumatization and studied it. There's research now on it. So I believe that it's important for those of us who work with and care for those who have experienced real firsthand traumatic stress and have PTSD to understand our own vulnerability to picking up some of those symptoms. If we do, it means that we're encountering secondary traumatic stress. A colleague of mine, John Wilson, described having the dreams of his Vietnam veterans. He was having dreams of scenes that he didn't live through. But after a dozen, in his case, returning Vietnam veterans told him what they had been through, he absorbed it. He was traumatized by their trauma. That's secondary traumatic stress or vicarious traumatization. Now, if you are the wife of a veteran or you are the husband of a woman who's been raped, you may find that you develop a caregiver burden. It's not quite the same as developing his or her PTSD. It's just that you have to take care of this person. This person, in part, is telling you their story. In part, they're hiding the story from you. But for a period of weeks or months or even years, they're not the same. So that's the caregiver burden. And you can see how having a caregiver burden when the person you're caring for has PTSD exposes you to their trauma and to their symptoms. You might end up with a combination of vicarious PTSD and caregiver burden. We use these terms so that people who are experiencing this know, number one, I'm not alone. Number two, it fits into a pattern. Number three, there are remedies for this. Now, the remedies tend to be overlapping too. The important remedy when you go down this path is have some other things in your life. Have sources that sustain you, whether it's exercise or good humor or taking a break or having a support group so that you can share what you're feeling and what you're learning with others. Compassion fatigue can happen to anybody. And the way Charles Figley and the followers of Figley define compassion fatigue, you still have your compassion, but you're tired. You're running out of your resilience. You're on the path toward burnout, but your compassion is there. The way Susan Moeller and others who've written, she wrote the book called Compassion Fatigue, based on her experience as a journalist. It's a different concept. In that case, your compassion has run out. You're no longer compassionate. You're getting hard and cynical and tough and not very pleasant. Now, that, to me, is burnout. It's burnout when you no longer have the milk of human kindness You no longer have the patience to do your job the way you have to do it. It's very, very bad in a police officer, because a burnt-out police officer is in danger of overreacting with violence or of treating the customer, me, the citizen, in a nasty way. You don't want to have a doctor who's burnt out, because they're lacking bedside manner. They may even be lacking the skills that they need to be a good doctor. So I think compassion fatigue, as defined by my colleagues in mental health, means you're sensitive, you're compassionate, you're empathizing with your patient, but it's too much for you. And you're hurting. And it's hard for you to do your work. But you're still salvageable. You've got the milk of human kindness. I don't want to say you have too much. You can never have too much. But you've begun to hurt, and you need help for your pain, while you still have your empathy and your altruism. There's a very different concept, which means that empathy and that altruism has run out. To me, that's burnout, and it's time for you to get out of the helping profession. And if you're a police officer, it's time for somebody in the chain of command to put you on leave and to make sure that you get what you need or you get out of the force.